Hey, it's Coach Anderson here again from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online. Today, what we're going to do, U.S. history, of course, from 1877 to present. Today, what we're going to do, of course, is we're going to pick up once again with Unit 2, and we're going to look at Lesson 5, the creation of big business, of course, in America. And we're going to be talking specifically about those robber barons, of course, more about those robber barons, of course, and those captains of industry. Remember what we always say, if you have a journal, go ahead and take out your journal this time and write down any of the focus questions, of course, that you may see, or the vocabulary. We'll try to address the vocabulary, of course, as we can. But here we start, of course, with the unit focus question. And the unit focus question for the entire unit, we won't answer, of course, at this time. But at the end of the unit, we will come back and we'll address it. The question is, how did the United States become an industrialized society after the Civil War? We're going to start with our do now. Once again, take your journals out and you can write the question down, of course, for the journal topic. And what it basically says is, what does the term mom and pop business mean to you? So at this time, go ahead and in your journals, write down what that term means. And we'll come back in a few seconds and a few minutes and we'll find out what you think. Okay. You should have had enough time, of course, that you were able to go through and look at that term mom and pop business, and maybe you came up with an idea about what it was. A mom and pop business traditionally is a sole proprietorship, which means basically it's owned by one person or one family. In this particular case, a mom and pop business, of course, would be any business, of course, that has that kind of dynamic. It is usually a small business, of course, and a family's livelihood, of course, depending on that business. And also at the same time, any profits made, of course, goes to the family, but any kind of problems or any kind of liabilities, of course, fall on the family also. We're going to find that America is going to transition away from these types of businesses, which are in most cases craft businesses like bakeries and tailors and shoemakers, and we're going to start transitioning to more big businesses that will be controlled by corporations. What we're going to do, of course, is introduce you to the vocabulary. Once again, you see it here, and as we said earlier, make sure that you write it down if it's something that we don't address, and you can look it up, of course, for yourself. And with that, what we're going to do, of course, is look at our learning focus question. And once again, you should maybe write these questions down because it should guide your understanding about what we're talking about in lesson number 5, big business. What advantages do large corporations have over small businesses? B, what new business strategies allow business to weaken or eliminate competition? And those are the questions that are going to guide this particular session. All right, the change in the issuance of government charters to create corporations changed after 1830. Prior to 1830, you couldn't create a corporation in the United States of America without some type of special dispensation. But after 1830, we're going to find that form of business organizations will become more widely accepted and open to more people. Too big to fail. That's the term, of course, that we hear all the time, of course, in our current modern or society in terms of looking at business. And that's the belief that, of course, that at big businesses, the larger they are, the more difficult, of course, for them to not be successful. Any business could fail, but the size of corporations allowed them some protection from failure. Because instead of one person putting their own money into the creation of the business, he puts investors' monies in. And what that does, of course, it insulates them in some cases from loss. And because of the sheer size of them in some cases, they could do things, of course, to address fixed costs like taxes, loans, and mortgages. It was something that we call economies of scale. In other words, it's easier for business to operate the larger they are. So the bigger the scale, the easier of operation. What advantages do large corporations have over small businesses? Well, this is one of those questions and we wanted to go through and address this one at this particular time rather than wait to the end of the lesson. But when we look at it, think about it. When you look at the advantages it has, it says they're more efficient, corporations are in most cases. They're resistant to market upheaval, which means those fixed costs doesn't affect them the way that it does a small business. They are low risk, and they can generate huge profits. So that kind of gives us an idea when we're talking about those 2 lesson focused questions. We wanted to separate them in this particular case so that you could zero in on how important, of course, corporations have become and still are a staple in American society and throughout the rest of the world. Consolidating industry. Remember now, the United States of America is a laissez-faire country or a free market country where we believe that businesses should not be interfered with by government. The emergence of large corporations which tried to eliminate competition in the marketplace had the opposite effect in the long run. The lack of government regulation allow businesses to collude to fix prices. So remember what we said here. Laissez-faire means that the government, of course, should stay out of the affairs of business. Well, the only problem with that, and sometimes, is if the business can run all of its competition out of the marketplace, then the consumer, like people that go and buy products like you and I, we have to buy, buy whatever product they produce at whatever price that these corporations set, because they don't have anybody in the marketplace that would compete with them for our business. Andrew Carnegie, one of those robber barons, of course, that creates a great amount of wealth because of his, what he does with the steel business. He created Carnegie Steel through vertical integration, which allowed him to harness every aspect of production process by controlling complementary businesses. That vertical integration allowed him to keep down costs and eliminate competition. What he decided to do in order to create his business is to take over all the businesses that could complement his business or help him run his business better, like railroads. Need railroads? Let me buy a railroad so I can move my steel. Let me buy mines so I can get the iron ore to produce my steel. So when you're looking at what he was doing, is he was buying up companies or businesses that would complement his business, so he didn't have to pay them for the services, of course, that they provided or the products that they provided. That's what we call vertical integration. The other robber baron that we're talking about real briefly is John D. Rockefeller. He didn't believe in vertical integration. He believed in horizontal integration, where Carnegie bought businesses that complemented his business to help with the production of products. Rockefeller simply just took over other oil companies, just run them out of business. So his idea of creating a huge corporation in this particular case was to run his competition out of business. And because of the sheer size of his business, at one point he's going to control 90% of America's oil production. And he can become one of the wealthiest men, of course, in the history of this country. On the left, Andrew Carnegie, an immigrant, by the way, from Scotland. And then John D. Rockefeller, of course, on the right. Here are a couple of other captains of industry or robber barons you would see. On the left, James Buck Duke, who made a whole lot of money, of course, in tobacco and railroads. And then on the right, the Commodore, Cornelius Vanderbilt. That's right, Vanderbilt University, the Commodores. And then on the left, of course, James Buck Duke, Duke University, of course, in Durham, North Carolina. Some of these legacies of these captains of industry, like Rockefeller, Carnegie, of course, and James Buck Duke, and of course, John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller, of course, was University of Chicago, endowed it, the Rockefeller Center, of course, for the arts. Once again, the theater, of course, created by, endowed by, John D. Rockefeller. Carnegie Hall, Carnegie Mellon University, I think, in Pittsburgh, which is a mining and engineering school, of course, in Pittsburgh. Stanford University, of course, on the West Coast with Leland Stanford. Vanderbilt University, of course, endowed by the Commodore, Cornelius Vanderbilt. Duke University, James Buck Duke, and Tuskegee Institute. A lot of people don't know this, but it was supported financially by Andrew Carnegie. Laissez-faire policy in the United States allowed for the creation of new business organization types that enhanced the rise of big business. The types of business organization that were created were trusts that were used, of course, by people like John D. Rockefeller, of course, when he took over control of smaller businesses in the oil industry, holding companies and investment banks. One of the biggest investment bankers at that particular time, he would use various assets in terms of banking, of course, to take over different businesses. And at one point, he uses his money to take over Carnegie Steel and creates U.S. Steel. And he creates $1 billion company, the first $1 billion company, of course, in American history. All right. Once we created all these products, of course, with American industry, now what do we do with them? We got to sell them. And if we can't sell them in the United States of America, we got to sell them in different places throughout the rest of the world. And that's going to lead to the, different things in terms of the direction of the country, in terms of finding markets overseas and all that. And we'll talk about that, of course, a little bit later. The creation of large-scale manufacturing in the United States led to large-scale retail businesses like department stores and chain stores, Wanamaker's, Grand Depot in Philadelphia, Montgomery Ward and Sears Roebuck. These were all places or businesses that were created to sell American products. All right, that gets us to the end of the lesson in terms of looking at what the lesson focus question is. We have one focus question I think that we have left. It says, what new business strategies allow businesses to weaken or eliminate competition? Well, if you think about it, we said the trust, the holding company, vertical integration by Carnegie, horizontal integration by John D. Rockefeller. A couple of practice questions to help you with the MAP assessment. In which type of 19th century organization were businesses combined to reduce competition? Trust, partnership, sole proprietorship, joint stock company? And the answer is A, the trust. Another question, how did the distribution of wealth change the United States due to industrialization in the late 1800s? Industrialists created profit sharing plans for their workers? Nope. Women and men's wages became the same? Nope, not even close, not even today. Congress passed laws mandating industry to pay a minimum wage. Industrialists became rich while factory workers remained poor. Well, the answer, of course, very simply is the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. Matter of fact, they say that these captains of industries, robber barons, made their money off the backs, of course, of the poor. Last question. Use the list below to answer the question. Andrew Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, Duke. How did these Gilded Age businessmen affect the United States? Their charities helped foster a system of social welfare in the United States. Their entrepreneurship led to the United States becoming a world industrial power. Their donation to the arts encouraged the increase of U.S. tourism. Their focus on foreign trade encouraged the movement of U.S. companies abroad. And the answer is their entrepreneurship helped the United States become a world industrial power. That, of course, ends lesson 5, and what we wanted you to do or take from lesson 5, of course, is how these big businesses were created, who created them, and what impact, of course, did they have on the United States of America. Now, if you think about it, there were some negatives and there were some positives. One of the positives, of course, if you look at people like Carnegie, Rockefeller, and some of these other guys that created endowments, of course, to improve the lives of American citizens by creating universities. And then when you look at museums and libraries that will be created throughout the 1800s, Andrew Carnegie is going to step, of course, and make sure that those types of institutions are created, of course, to improve American citizens and their lives. But once again, don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Go through and look at one of the important periods in American history and make your own determination on decisions. And just like we said, it's America's history, which means it's your history. So do your own research, and we'll see you next time.